I'm still getting onto the Instagram. Guys, welcome back. It is episode 79 of the Happy Hour. Who's going to be first in the comments? Who can tell us? George, mate. First one in, straight up. That's incredible. Can you tell us whether or not we're sounding like robots or not? It would definitely help. Anyway, guys, thank you so much, obviously, for chiming in. Lockie was the first one in with a comment. Yuko, Kerry, Jicky. Looks like Justin is taking a well-deserved break, because I tell you what, that guy's absolute dedication to timing is incredible. So I do certainly hope that he and Christina are out enjoying themselves. This, of course, is Sunday. It is a long weekend, but we're keeping with the tradition of Sundays being, I guess, it's like a Sunday casual business, which we decided not to be casual. I'm back in the Unico gear, courtesy of actually quite an amazing podcast. I know a fair few people that are chiming in do actually listen to this as a podcast, and there is an amazing one called the Vincast that is run by a chap named James Scaresbrook that you absolutely need to be chiming into. And of course, we still do indeed have the bar open, hence the bit of a background noise.
But in the background.
But first and foremost, Laura, how are you?
Good. Well, I'm excited that so this is our second day open, and
broke the record.
We've broken, busiest day on record 2 days in a row, which is a great sign of people wanting to get out and support businesses. And also, prior to COVID, a lot of our visitors were from interstate, but obviously right now everyone's coming up from Adelaide.
Which is, it's actually really quite cool,
really awesome.
Very humbling to have obviously the local support. And it's also one of those things that when we released a new gin.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about it?
No.
New gin? So we released a new gin called Coral, which is basically we're branching outside of what we're doing with Applewood and launching into the realm of looking at Australian landscapes. And of course, why don't we sort of give up the land entirely and look at a seascape? Strawberry gumleaf being a more not entirely seaside eucalypt, but it's close to it.
Warmer climate.
Carcolour, which is what a lot of people would know as pigface and rye berries, as a pink gin, and we're giving 1% of its turnover to charity. And we released that in the middle of COVID. Yes, I know, Terry, you're probably going to watch this back and say, I need a drink. I have PTSD now after this whole deal. But it has been quite eye-opening to see like a lot of the local support coming up for a new product, because we've never had a new product being released during a mass closure, and it's blown every single record we've ever had, which is you have no idea how much of a difference it actually makes to us. So this is obviously question time. So if you have any burning questions, absolutely any burning questions, this is the time to ask them, because we've actually managed to nail down the CEO of Unico, Laura Carter, the wine queen herself, because I think it's really important that people hear from both, like we are both, would you say we're different personalities?
We are literally the opposite of each other.
We're
literally
the opposite.
And anyone that's met us, or even people that haven't met us, and I try and describe the kind of person Brendan is, they almost don't believe me, and then they meet him and go, oh yeah, he was exactly how you said it.
That's exactly how you said it.
I'm like, yeah.
And so I think it's really important that people actually hear from the both of us to actually see, because we do tackle things from the complete opposite dynamic, the complete opposite perspective, and I think that's one of our strengths. That's one of our, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%, yeah.
And if not, we have the 2019 Master of Wine entrance examination open, and we're going to start moving through this, because to be honest, they're probably some of the most interesting questions that I think. And last time we did this with the 2018 past exam.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. But we will be constantly chiming into you guys. So if you have any questions, definitely pipe up. But what are we drinking tonight? Because we're drinking something actually fun tonight.
Yeah, so this is something that Karina Wright from Oliver's Taranga gave us after she came on the show. And so she's been making Fiano for, I imagine, over 10 years, and it's planted on
longer than us, definitely a lot longer than us.
And her next project was to make a method traditional Fiano.
All right, so let's get a little bit basic. Method traditional. What the F is that?
Well, I'm going to let you explain it, but as a bit of context, when the reason you can't call champagne, the reason there's a difference between champagne and sparkling wine is because of the region they come from, but there's also different production practices. So there are 3 different ways to make sparkling wine. The first one is carbonation, which is like making Coca-Cola. And then there's
big cylinder, just into a tank, carbonate
bubble
it.
Carbonate it, and you end up with wine in a bottle that's carbonated. And then the next step is charmat, and then the third option is method traditional. And the reason champagne is so expensive and wines made in this method are so expensive is because of the time and
it's horrendous. It's horrendously inefficient. So essentially, between carbonation and charmat is an Italian sort of, I'm going to say like a derivative of method traditional or method champenoise, or the traditional method, which was developed in Champagne in I believe the mid 1800s, or no, late 1700s, early 1800s. But basically, if you've got a giant tank, imagine the giant tank as your bottle, and you're doing the secondary fermentation. If you've ever made beer at home, if you've got those at-home beer making kits where they kind of like seed it with a little bit of sugar and you cap it in a bottle and it takes off again, well, that's basically what you're doing. You're seeding with a little bit of sugar. It's what we call the liqueur. So a little bit of liqueur. The tirage, literally sort of on itself. So it's actually going in on itself. The yeast that you introduce, you can introduce yeast, or you can actually, in the realms of something like a pet nat, would actually have residual yeast from the primary fermentation. But basically, think of it like a giant tank. They do that secondary fermentation right there in the bottle, and that creates all of the carbonation itself inside here. It also creates a lot of yeast, which need to be settled out prior to bottling, but a lot of people will also call this the Prosecco method.
Yeah.
It's a really great way to make a lot of wine, really tasty, in a very quick manner, and which that's the reason why typically Prosecco is a little bit cheaper than champagne or method traditional wines. This here though is the creme de la creme. This is the Porsche level. This is the Tesla level of sparkling winemaking. So basically, as you're actually making the base wine, that secondary fermentation, the thing they're doing in the giant tank, they're doing it bottle by bottle by bottle, individual bottles. So this bottle was filled with wine once, and true method traditional, the bottle you buy off the shelf is the bottle the secondary ferment happened in. And it actually gets, there's the d'expedition, which is the expedition. What happens is the fermentation will occur inside the bottle, and a bunch of yeast lees will drop down, and then they'll upend it and riddle it towards the neck, freeze the neck, and then basically open it up, and the neck will shoot out. It'll be like a little block of ice, and then they'll top it up with a little bit of liqueur d'expedition, dosage, it could have a dosage to it, and then they'll cap it off again. We'll put a cork in it and make it really pretty, and that's how you get your bottle. You can imagine just how laborious something like that would be. And it's really fascinating to see it from this perspective, because this ain't your typical champagne. This ain't your typical sparkling wine, because this is not Chardonnay.
Yeah, and so Chardonnay or Pinot Noir are your classic champagne varieties grown in Champagne. And all the methods that Brendan just described, they all start with making a base wine, and that base wine traditionally has or needs to have very high acid, lower alcohol, so that when it goes to the secondary fermentation, it's going to create more alcohol from there. And also, you need to have acidity in this style of wine.
Yeah,
and
totally.
A lot of the texture that you get from wine happens in the secondary fermentation. So your base wine is actually, it's important to get it right, but the characteristics you look for in a base wine to make sparkling or champagne is very different to making a regular
basically,
table
if
wine.
it strips paint, it's that acidic.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be pretty good as
They
sparkling
are
wine.
very undrinkable. Like people that make sparkling or champagne for a living, their palates are completely different because they're used to tasting such acidic wine, but they can see a level of detail in those wines because they know they can make the connection from the base wine to what it's going to be after it's fermented in the bottle.
But this here, Fiano, incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, we have deleted the entire bottle in less than an hour. I should. You got to check this out because it's one of the most beautiful labels that we've actually seen on a bottle of wine. The Hunt for Mrs. Oliver is what the wine's called. I'm not too sure if Oliver's Taranga have any left because I did note that this was bottle number 1687.
When she was with us, she said she's been making it for about 5 years now, and every year increasing the level of production. So
a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is why these wines are so special. These method traditional.
A lot of good
wines.
But we've just had an amazing question come in from Sue and Craig. So Sue Bond, hi again. Our question is about Stelvin caps. I wondered what you thought about the aging process. Sometimes the older wines take hours to settle. You can be disappointed at first and eventually it can turn out to be a lovely drop. I'm not quite convinced by them.
Okay.
But we have two wines actually particular that are open in front of us. Like these are the only other two wines that we've got open here, which is really quite something else. So did you want to talk about what Stelvin caps do in the aging process?
Yeah, so the two different ways to seal a wine, and these are the most commonly used ones. The first one is a cork, and then the second one is Stelvin, or also commonly known as the screw cap. Stelvin is actually the name of the brand that, I guess, patented the screw cap technology. And in Australia, it's incredibly common, but Australia and New Zealand are the only two countries where it's predominantly screw cap that we seal our wines under. The rest of the world would normally go to cork, and that's happened for a few reasons. The first one is that like sort of, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s, as Australian wine production was growing, and at that point Stelvin didn't exist, we were only sealing under cork, and we were the furthest country away, we were the youngest winemaking country, and so we were basically getting a lot of the corks that were crap.
Keep in mind as well though, at the time, we were really handing it to a lot of the pundits in Europe. In the key markets like the UK, we were seriously dominating that entire market as an industry. And there was a lot of nefarious dealings when it came to actually accessing the good quality cork. Yeah.
So like there was a point in Australia where we were getting 1 in 10 corks, corks in a bag pre-bottle were affected with TCA, so which is cork taint, and a lot of people would have tried or experienced cork taint before. And so the Australian wine community got together and said, we actually need to come up with another solution, and screw cap was already being researched, and so the Australian wine industry sort of got behind that and paid for and trialled it, and that's why Australia has such a predominance of screw cap. But the technology side of it it works completely differently, doesn't it?
Completely differently, and there is I think there's a lot to understand about closures. We actually did a YouTube video about this because there seems to be a lot of confusion as to what closure, when, where, and why, and in particular in regards to the aging process. This one here is actually a very particular type of Stelvin that I believe has actually been phased out because it's been proven that it doesn't work. But first, I just want to quickly acknowledge Lockie George, who was the first commenter tonight, gave us this bottle yesterday. Thank you so much. And it is looking, I poured you a glass because awesome. It is looking really interesting today. A lot different to as it was looking yesterday. And this sort of goes in line with what Sue was saying. You can be disappointed at first and eventually can turn it to be a lovely drop. This is what I think what Lockie was talking about. And I'd love, Lockie, if you're still chiming in, to let us know, because this feels like aged Riesling. This feels, there's like the TDN, what we call, it's that character that is reminiscent of kerosene, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just showcases in a few select varieties that happen to showcase, something like this. So not dissimilar to Riesling. This is looking really good. But this here is a Stelvin Lux. So if you note, I guess, the external aesthetics, not that actually, I think, personally means much, of this particular bottle. See how it's really flat at the top? And so essentially Stelvin, the company, developed this thing called the Stelvin Lux. You probably won't be able to make it out on that, but it just says it very subtly on there. Now the interior of this is actually pretty much all plastic. There's this sort of plastic poly liner, and there's another poly liner here as well. So the whole idea was to try to make something that looked aesthetically pleasing on the shelf. Turns out you can't get the machines that actually tighten these things up to torque exactly perfect, which apparently with wine is what you actually need. So they phased this out and they went back to the original I believe they've went back to the original Stellans that were a bit of a tried and true product. Here we've got something different, and the reason why I digress is to, I just want to check, okay. This is not a natural cork, although it is made in, I guess, from natural cork. So if you notice, it's actually what we call an aglo cork or agglomerated cork. I'm trying to get the light on it so you can sort of see. But the most important part of this cork is that it is a branded cork. Not all corks are made the same. Not all agglomerated corks are actually made the same. This one here is a very special one. It's the one that we use internally. And many winemakers use. I'll try, I'm not sure that you're going to be able to pick it up, but it says DIAM, DIAM5. That is the thing you want to look for.
Yeah, any Unico Zelo wines have
DIAMs.
Cool.
You will be able to see this. Now this is DIAM5. The oxygen ingress and egress rate of a screw cap is equivalent to DIAM10, I believe. So how cool is this? When it comes to a screw cap, a winemaker has one choice, that one. There's no, you can't change the liners in them, you can't do anything like that. But when it comes to these, we can choose from, I think it's like DIAM 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30.
Yeah.
So those correspond to two things. Firstly, oxygen and ingress and egress rates, but also the amount of years that the parent company will actually guarantee this product, the retail value of this product. If you can prove that their product itself caused any failure with your wine. Now that's a ballsy call to say, hey, look, in 30 years time, your $10,000 a bottle wine is going to be okay. But we're pretty confident on that. They released that product, and I believe Grange, possibly there's a selection of Penfolds Grange that's now under DIAM 30s. So not all closures are made the same, and they all do age at different rates. This is sort of like the cork industry's answer to the screw cap. So it's basically a very efficient way of turning a natural cork, which has a lot of wastage associated with it and a lot of inherent inconsistencies associated with it.
Which is what's cool about the story, is that screw cap was invented because the cork industry had never had a pressure to improve. And so Australia decided, well, whatever, stuff this, we're just going to come up with our own closure. And then the response to that has been the original cork industry in Portugal to go, okay, fine, we're going to start researching. We're actually going to innovate. We're going to improve our process. We're going to create new products that don't have TCA.
So over $1 billion has been put into this one particular closure. And that is incredible, considering that you only ever see it used for wine. But it's actually really robust. Things like putting a wine down on its side to keep the cork moist, don't need to do it with these. It's actually a positive pressure seal, so you can actually leave it up for indefinitely. Much like a screw cap. So they've really answered all of the screw caps, pros that to the cork's cons. But yeah, a screw cap is a very heavily controlled level. It's very consistent, but reduction.
Yes.
Wine needs a certain amount of air to live. Too much and it dies. Wine is all about balance, and that is no lesser true than when it's in the bottle as when it's on the vine, or even when it's in fermentation. It is always about balance. You always need to be pushing things like grapevines to struggle to give you better fruit, pushing ferments to within an inch of their life of going off to be able to ferment if you want to use things like wild fermentation and minimal intervention. And then even when it's in the bottle, you're exposing it to minute amounts of oxygen to control that. These are such a good seal that they actually tend to leave, especially with modern day winemaking techniques, what we call reductive winemaking techniques. So would you have an idea of like reductive winemaking techniques plays oxidative winemaking techniques?
Well, I guess reductive is that you're not exposing the wine to any oxygen. So even during ferment, when you're receiving the fruit, you're blanketing it with a gas like nitrogen or carbon dioxide to prevent oxygen getting into it. Anything that's fermented in barrel on a lot of yeast tends to be quite reductive as well. So like Chardonnay can have that flinty reductive character. Sometimes it is nice. And then the other thing that happens with reduction is if you have stressed vineyards and stressed yeasts, that's one of the bad effects that yeast puts out. If it's stressed, it will put out a reductive character.
And the way to actually achieve balance in the wine is to, funnily enough, give it a bit of air. Give it a bit of oxygen. Think of it like decanting your wine, but doing it on a much bigger scale prior to actually it hitting a bottle. These have a tendency to showcase a little bit more reduction because they're such a good seal. So
Yeah.
they don't allow enough air into it. And that's why even we at Unico Zelo, like, I think we max out at de-arm 10s. I don't even think we even go past de-arm 10s.
No, and we don't, and that's a part of our, I guess, philosophy as well, is that people will, and our winemaking approach is that people will often drink our wines, and the styles of wines that we make are for earlier drinking.
I mean, I don't think that we've ever made a wine that we wanted to see last in someone's cellar more than 10 years.
Yeah.
And we get that people want to do that. It's just, we also have not existed for more than 10 years and don't have that data. Plus, we're still learning as winemakers. We're still getting, like, if we were given $1 billion and had, like, we would know how to spend that, I assure you. You know, we would have the best vineyards, we'd have the best equipment, we'd have all the best things. And then we would comfortably say, hey, this wine here, 25 years, don't touch it, but we don't, you know. We only got an airbag press like a year ago. So we're still accumulating the kit that allows us to be able to make better quality wine as we go.
Yeah.
Cool question.
So because a cork is more porous, it naturally gets more oxygen into the bottle, which is why they tend to be more open, whereas a screw cap, there's hardly any oxygen getting into the bottle. They're very closed, especially when you first open them. And now, like, over the last, it was sort of early to, or mid 2000s when it became really popular in Australia, and the winemaking practices of Australian wineries have changed to be able to make sure that the wine that's sealed under screw cap does look good when it's opened.
Yeah.
What's the other thing I was going to say?
Well, I guess the wine style itself.
I was going to talk about bottle shock.
Oh yeah, shockiness.
Yeah,
It's
a
the
lot
worst.
of wines bottled under screw cap for the first 4 to 6 weeks after you bottle them, they don't look anything like the original wine. And it's to do with this, what we call shock, but it's taking a wine that has previously had oxygen, and then now you put it in a bottle with 0 oxygen and it doesn't look like itself.
It's also frustrating as well because, like, with the proliferation of small winemakers, in particularly in South Australia, but also small anything. We're seeing like what we call the artisan movement. It's in spirits, it's in handbags, it's in skincare, it's in everything. That's a good thing. It's a really good thing. We haven't seen a proliferation of service industry to those new players. So we've seen lots of new wineries, not a lot of new bottling lines. And it may actually sort of surprise you to know that the vast majority of wine in Australia is not actually bottled by the winery. It's actually sent off to a independent operator. And Woolworths actually own one of the largest one, I guess, that bottles wine. And that inherently means that wines typically get fairly shot, because you can imagine putting a lot of wine into a tanker, and it goes for, in some cases, up to 3 or 4 hours away to be bottled and then be sent back. And you don't have the control over the process. So the other thing is, like, obviously with the screw cap, they flash it with a noble gas, whether it's an argon or typically a nitrogen, which closes a wine down. If it doesn't have air, it doesn't live. And so, yeah, this is the tumultuous thing of every winemaker, needs a bit of air. So getting a sort of a long way around to answering the question, Sue and Craig, I would suggest with something that is looking a little bit sort of disappointing, flash decant. We showed you guys that before, and you don't need fancy equipment. Tupperware container will be fine. Seriously, you can literally just, and I mean, you want to vigorously get it in, like pour it from height, get it in there. You could even shake it up a little bit, pour it back into the bottle. So you've got the experience, of course, of pouring from the bottle. You don't necessarily need to, but that gives it a big flash of air to begin with. And I would probably wait maybe 10 minutes, and then you're gonna start seeing a different style of wine very quickly. You don't need fancy equipment for that. It's probably the best way. Regarding these, you know, it's all up to the interpretation of the taster, I guess. Is, you know, there's no real right or wrong. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. That's fine. But we do know from a technical perspective, screw caps tend to show reductive characters, which close a wine down. Still here, BC, LC. I tried to finish the bottle within a couple of hours talking about the belly here. Mate, that last night was almost like a Albarino-y-esque thing, and it was sort of, it was cool, but it wasn't like, it didn't blow my socks off. That is amazing. Yeah, that's actually really cool. Yeah. That feels like maybe 2008 Clare Valley Riesling territory with a bit more body. That's cool wine. That's a really cool wine. Thank you so much. I owe you. I won't forget. I do love the wine though. Sadly, Corey only did 1 or 2 vintages. Yeah, I think that was because the grape variety just didn't sort of exist. From I guess, viticultural perspective, Slankamenka Bella as a variety, is a bit of a weird one. It's a bit of a tough one to grow. Hello, you two, Mark Reginardo. Everyone remembers Reggie, that dreaded episode. Thank you, Reggie, for chiming in. Some sparkling wines are sold on a screw cap now too, mainly for on-premise market, making it easy for restaurant workers, I guess, but a little less romantic.
I have not seen that yet, and that kind of makes my heart hurt a little bit.
That's Laura's way of saying shit.
But this is the comment though is easier for restaurant workers, and to be fair, we have had the same pushback with Unico Zelo wines under cork. Is that firstly, obviously it takes longer to open a cork than it does to crack a screw cap, and there are a lot of people that don't necessarily know how to use a corkscrew. And often when we do events with Unico Zelo wine, I always let the host know beforehand that they are on a cork and you need to have a corkscrew. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, we better figure out where that is. We haven't used it for a while.
Okay, just like for those that have been chiming in since the beginning, you guys know the amount of tools that we have evaluated for opening up bottles of wine. When it came to shit wine inventions, there's several key areas. Opening bottles of wine, decanting bottles of wine, and serving or drinking from bottles of wine. And the opening bottles of wine is by far the one that has actually had the vast amount of shitty wine inventions, when this is by far the easiest and best thing. In fact, even more so than this, the Arso.
Yeah, and actually this has been overused because
the jab and jerk from Reggie.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So
I said it's so easy.
And he said back in my day we learnt how to open bottles with a waiter's friend, but like the next generation, it's all about the jab and jerk.
It's all about the jab and jerk, mate. It's all about the jab and jerk. Apparently there's a gas-powered one sitting at East End Cellars, Reggie. So I know you're just a hop, skip and a jump from them. You should borrow it and see what your customers think.
Yeah, so for us, if a waiter comes to your table and is opening the wine, that's the opportunity for connection, right? And that's the opportunity to talk about wine and see it at the table.
I never thought of that.
When you lose that, when it's just cracking the bottle, I think you're missing an opportunity in terms of service and experience. And for us, we're kind of forcing people to talk about our wine, because what are they going to do while they're opening the bottle? They're not just going to stand there in silence. They're going to be...
Plus, it's not that hard. Look, if you don't know how to open up a bottle, like this is simple shit. This is so simple stuff. I would suggest maybe not serving wine. And here's the other thing. The only argument that I've actually found for screw caps that stands up in my opinion, and it's a legit one, it's a really legit one, is if you're elderly and you can't get into the bottle. Particularly with sparkling wines. They tried to develop something called the Zork. Remember that? Oh, it was terrible. Google it, Z-O-R-K, seriously. It's just as hard, if not more difficult to get, but it reseals itself, but buy smaller sparkling bottles. They come in smaller bottles. But that's a legitimate argument to make things a little bit easier for elderly people that can't actually access one.
But wasn't that the idea behind the person?
The whole person thing? Yeah, I mean, I would argue that was probably like even more difficult than this.
Yeah.
To be honest, especially a two-stage. You want the two-stage one. That makes things really easy for people. Having a bottle of wine is more than just drinking wine. It's an experience or a tradition, and opening wine is just as important as presenting and drinking it.
Yeah.
Scott, that is probably the most intelligent shit that I've ever heard come out of your mouth. Thank you. I love you. No, seriously, that's so dead right.
But we feel exactly the same. Yeah,
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Who loves the popping sound of this, the cracking sound of this, like, you know, screw cap is a technical closure. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
There are better ones though. There are better ones, and they're about just as cheap.
Yeah, and that's it. Now they are. We're lucky to be making wine at a time where there are alternatives to natural cork that don't have TCA as prolific as they were in the 90s. So we have bottled Unico wines under screw cap before, and it was a personal choice and ethical choice to put it under cork ongoing. But that doesn't take away from what I love is the innovation and the ingenuity of a whole country, and it's Australia. Like we're not going to change the world in terms of our wine volume, but we still decided to go ahead and pursue an alternative.
Look, I was always taught to lead by example. So like, you know, if you want to affect change, understand that you might not be able to do that yourself.
Yes, exactly.
But if you can do it and you can afford to do it, you should do it. And there is no doubt, no question, trust me, we know, to be sustainable in this world is expensive. It is simply expensive. And we've had to find really, really, really novel ways to make Unico wines approachable in price point, while still being as sustainable as we possibly can be. And when I say as we possibly can be, I hazard a guess that there would be few at that level, unless we owned vineyards and ran our own vineyards. There'd be few at the level that we would be in terms of the calculation of things like CO2 per unit of packaging, and obviously, you know, things like closures alone. Well, I'm yet to see the tin and steel tree be planted. You know, it's far more sustainable to grow more cork trees, which are actually perennial. You know, that's what makes them special. But we've spoken about that before. Laura, I agree, it's part of the experience having the bottle opened at the table. Thank you very much, Kerry. Zork is the ugliest wine invention in my opinion.
It is.
It's really bad.
Almost said it should be a shit wine invention, but I don't.
It's so hard to open.
I haven't seen it for a while. I kind of like the idea that you can use the same cork to reseal the bottle.
That's kind of cool.
Because with a champagne cork, I mean, and again, it's a bit like Lockie said before, I finish a bottle when I open it. And a bottle of sparkling, it would, I don't know, I actually have never had to reseal a bottle of sparkling. Well,
speaking of Lockie, he opened a bottle under Zork last night. I have no idea.
And what was it?
What was it? I want to know, was it?
Our bets are with a Prosecco, I guess. I just haven't seen an Australian producer use it for a while.
There's like, we've seen a lot of Yellowtail. They tend to. That was the last one that I purchased, and I purchased to put into spritzers.
Given what Lockie's been drinking and posting on the show, I don't think he was drinking Yellowtail.
I don't think he was drinking any wine of the sort, but I'm fascinated to know. All right, so jumping on to something from, I think this was from Christina. I'd love to see a decision tree for wine tasting. And I thought this was kind of cool, because we've come up with a bit of a, you know, I've enjoyed the blind tasting experience. Have you?
Oh, yeah, and not even tasting it myself. I like the challenge of trying to trip you up.
And I'm pretty confident you guys have enjoyed the blind tasting experience as well.
Yeah.
And a fair few of you have actually been taking it to heart to do it at home, which I think is really cool, because it puts the conversation back on a flavour. Flavour is the thing that matters. Flavour is the thing that puts us, you know, ties us to a place. And once you start to associate those flavours with a place, you get really quite passionate about everything. It's not just wine, but then you start to pick up on certain flavours. Like we did sardines. Remember, was that only a week ago?
Yeah, it was this last Sunday. Yeah, it was the $8 or the $5 sardines versus the $16 sardines.
And you can pick up on it. That was so different. They were incredibly different. A decision tree for wine tasting. We're actually thinking about, I guess, I'm not sure what you'd call it. Not point of sale stuff, like print stuff that is like a blind tasting. And we're thinking about maybe doing a bit of like a blind tasting experience thing that we could send out to people, going, look, there's going to be a bottle in your mixed dozen this month, and here is the chart. Do it yourself, send in your answer, and you could win a prize. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
And it could be anything. It could be anything out of the cellar. It could be, you know, we make a fair few wines, we make a fair few things, and you would need to try to pick it. I think would be really fun. What do you guys think?
Because one of our favorite wine bars in New York, they do a blind wine each month, and it's you know that it's a wine on their list, but you don't know which one it is, and you can order a glass, and they give you a little card, and you can guess what the wine is. And if you win it, you get the bottle. You get to drink the whole bottle.
Was that that's Compagnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, Compagnie. Yeah. In my ideal, hey Reggie, here's an idea for you. You should do a blind tasting thing down at Hellbound, like just on the menu. Make it happen.
And then at the, anyway. And then at the end of the month, they announce on their social media what the wine was. So at least if you were in there and you got it wrong,
you'd know.
You'll find out
you'd figure
down
it out.
The track. But we always do that when we go there, because it's such a, you get to talk to the person behind the bar about the wine, and they obviously know what it is, but they're kind of challenging you to keep searching and keep looking for what you think it is.
Well, speaking of Zorks, like you said, I don't want to name and shame. It was a McLaren Vale producer, opened at a party, ran a bottle in ice bath. Hey man, we ain't judging you. We ain't judging the wine producer. That's fine. I'm curious to know just the uptake of that particular closure. But totally fine. Like if you're at a party, like
I just haven't seen it for a while.
I haven't seen it for a while. I've seen it for a very, very long while. To be fair, we tried the posh, this Unico, the Oritz last night. It was so yum. Seriously, it is next level.
Oh,
it's next level good.
Breaking the bank account though.
Reggie, we do mystery wines, and Mother Vine actually has a game. You're dead right.
Cool.
So it's like a tick thing, or like a checkbox thing that you can do. I think that's really fun, really engaging. Consumer has the option of playing options, or we tell them straight up if they don't want to. I reckon that's really cool
awesome.
as well.
So everyone in Adelaide, if you go to Hellbound, and I assume Hellbound is open now?
I assume so, yeah, absolutely as well. Reggie, can you confirm that?
Ask for Reggie and he'll be able to do options.
Options, wine game, seriously.
Cool.
It's just a bit of fun, all right, speaking of a bit of fun.
This is serious training.
Serious training. Well, geez, we can. Before we jump into the MW exam, because who wants to do that on a Sunday? Laura, please choose a wine from here. I'm yet to find someone that chooses the left or the right.
Bucket nanas.
I don't know what they are. It's just everyone's chosen one from the middle.
Plus it was a Bordeaux bottle, so.
All right, so we are, of course, playing a little bit of cheeky blind tasting because there was enough chatter about it. Laura, would you mind averting the gaze, and I will crack this cheeky little fella open. And I want to know from everyone playing at home. Have you taken it upon yourselves to do a cheeky little bit of blind tasting in the last 90 days or so? Because I know we've not just done it obviously on the show, but we do it at home as well. It just it keeps things a little bit interesting, a little bit heated, a little bit fun. All right. Now, before you turn around, Laura, I'm going to let the lovely people playing at home know exactly what we are tasting here. But I thought I would give you the wine irrespective, so you can start trying to figure out exactly what it is. Oh, this is pretty cool. All right. All right. Whoa, almost stacked it. Okay, Laura, let's do this.
All right.
Oh, did you look?
No,
didn't see?
I didn't. No,
didn't see?
I didn't take the opportunity.
Okay. What are you thinking so much?
It's red, and it's old world.
What makes you say that?
Well, it could be New World. There's quite a lot of tannin there, which either means oak or it's varietal.
It's quite remarkable amount of tannin.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the really ripe fruit character. It could be a specific variety made in a New World country, but I actually think it's more of a modern interpretation from an Old World country.
Now, just not to cut you off, but Boy & Co AU on Instagram has just said you need a cork pop to speed up the opening. Is this the legitimate name for the jab and jerk? Boy & Co AU, if you are still chiming in, I want to know. We have a tool here. We call it either the wine wanker or the jab and jerk. Is it actually called the cork pop? We don't actually know.
It's actually a great name.
Cork Pop's a pretty good name.
It's such a good name.
Cork Pop's a fantastic name. Anyway, so you're going with red
and Old World.
Red and Old World. Yes, it is both those two things. Yeah.
All right.
Are you in Italy, France, or Spain?
Italy.
Why do you think that?
It's just the tannin.
Amen. I'm yet to see a wine out of France.
Yeah.
That is just so not scared, not afraid of tannin.
Well, that's it, isn't it? They're
Doesn't
more
tame
like
the tannins.
delicate and kind of. The French wine can be a little bit understated.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be a little bit disappointing.
Yeah.
Because it's not as obvious.
A bit muted.
Yeah, so when you're learning about wine and you try French wine, especially very good French wine, sometimes you're a little bit like underwhelmed.
It's certainly a fun wine.
It makes me think this is a little bit more forward and suggestive. So I
drink a lot of this. Hashtag I drink a lot of this. I would like this feels like something that I will not let you know.
You can't tell me because it's
all right. It is Italian. It is Italian.
Yes.
Is it from the north of Italy or the south of Italy?
I think it's from the north of Italy.
You think it's from the north?
Yeah. I think it's from the north, but I don't have...
What makes you think that it's from the north?
Oh, look, I don't know if this is actually true, but I imagine that the south it's obviously warmer, so it'd be riper fruit. And for some reason, I'm also thinking the soils are a little bit more fertile.
Okay.
Whereas in the north, they'd be more granitic and less fertile, so you would get a lot of tannin without necessarily fruit profile.
It's interesting. This is indeed from the south.
Okay, cool. All right.
It is from the south. But your reasoning, I think, is really, really logical, like totally logical, for sure. So would this be from Campania, Calabria, or Etna? Oh, this is cool. So Boinco is coming going low. No wank. Cork Pop has a CO2 canister to push the cork out. No broken corks. Is this the thing?
Oh, is this the thing at East End Cellars?
Is this the thing at East End Cellars? It's like, because I've got like one that is manual that you pierce and then you do this and it pops out. But you've got one that you pierce and you press a button and it goes chink and it just pops out. I want to know. Let me know.
Well, and that sounds good for the old person problem.
The Cork Pop. All right, so we've got...
what was the first one?
Campania.
Calabria.
Or Etna.
Oh, man. I'm not that familiar with Calabrian wine, so I wouldn't... The only thing I know about Calabria is Anduia.
Negro Amaro country, red soil.
I know.
Campania's got some elevation. It's got also Talrazzi, of course.
No, that's
Unico.
Campania. I meant Calabria.
No, but I'm saying
Campania
you've also
has
got things
Talrazzi,
like...
which can be really rich.
Really tannic.
It could be...
Of course, Etna's got Nerello. Etna's got Nero. Down into Vittoria. Got some really cool soils.
I'll say Calabria because I don't know.
It is Etna.
Oh.
It is Etna.
Which is the soil type thing. All right, so, okay, yep, it's Etna.
So if you were talking about the south, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the south. You're talking about how it's going to be a lot more warm there. It's going to be really sort of more robust fruit and stuff like that. This definitely doesn't have that.
No, and it's probably due to elevation or soil type. Yeah. Which explains Etna, higher elevation. And Etna is like crazy elevation.
Crazy elevation.
Even
like a mile up.
Even the lower vineyards are still elevated.
Yeah. So therefore, what would this variety be?
Etna varieties. Well, Nerello is the obvious one.
Nerello Mascalese. This is indeed. Yeah. It could have. I'll check out, but I'm pretty confident this is 100% Nerello Mascalese. Okay. It could have Nerello Cappuccio. And then there's another Nerello that it doesn't come to mind, to be honest. But there's another red as well. But the vast majority is really Nerello Mascalese. All right. So what vintage do you think this is? Do you think this is 12, 14, or 16?
Oh wow!
It's impressive, isn't it? Irrespective, it's impressive.
Those tannins have not died.
No, they have not.
12, 14, or 16?
Yeah.
Jesus. 14?
No. 16.
16.
16.
Wow.
I don't think you've tried this producer before. It's brought in by Vinify, which is a cheeky little company actually based in Adelaide. And
it's really cool.
It is Nerello Mascalese and Nerello Cappuccio, so it is a blend of two.
And
incredible.
Nerello is always what is often described as Pinot Noir of Sicily. But it's literally only in reference to like the fruit weight.
This
like
isn't Pinot, so this is like Nebbiolo of Sicily. This is
like
next
Nebbiolo
level
of
tannin.
Sicily.
Yeah.
And probably in Italy you can't say that because it would be offensive to Nebbiolo producers.
So Boinco, are you? Yep, Eastern Cellars are a stockist. Do you make them or distribute them? I want to know. Are they blind or blacked out glasses? Yes, they absolutely are. That we don't know what that. Well, Laura didn't know what they are. I was doing the game. Incredible. So I love how Laura is so logical when she does blind tasting. Yeah, Laura, that's like Laura Logical Carter. It's her middle name. Cork Pop. There's no name. Jab and Jerk sounds better. There's a bit of feedback. Boinco, are you? Jab and Jerk, perhaps. It takes the fun out of it. That's a pretty crazy little wine, isn't it?
It's lovely, yeah. Well, because we're about to have a fire tonight because it's finally not ready.
What would you have this with?
Well, that's what I was just thinking, like some kind of smoky meat, outdoorsy.
Well, isn't that just so incredibly perfect? Because we're going to do some junk food wine pairing right now.
Okay.
And you grew up in a place that served this. How long did you spend in South Africa growing up?
About 3 years.
Yeah, so today we have some traditional Jack Links biltong, which I just think would go perfectly well with this.
I'm going to tell you that I've never had biltong out of a plastic packet before, and I'm already concerned.
I'm concerned as well. All right. Sorry for all the meat, non-meat eaters out there for what you're about to see. But of course, we are talking about. Would you say this is the national food of South Africa?
Oh, there's lots of traditional foods in South Africa, but this is probably, I guess, the most internationally known. Is biltong. This is hard.
This doesn't taste like traditional biltong.
No, it doesn't.
The tannin in this goes really well with the protein of that, for sure. But there's like a tuna thing going on, right?
Yeah, it's to do with the texture. It's like the meat's been tenderized with some kind of chemical, would be my guess.
Be like a sodium hydroxide or something.
Yeah.
I don't really like this.
No.
But I don't know much about meat.
We don't eat junk food for us. We eat it for the show.
For the people,
For the
man.
people.
For the people. We do this for you guys.
So if you were... What about Truffle Hound?
I think you need tannin.
Yeah, like...
I think jerky biltong needs tannin. Needs like really rich, dense tannin. And this has that in spades.
Yeah, it does. And like that smoky tannin too.
Pretty good match. I'm going to say Etna Rosso and biltong is a legitimate match. Seriously, try it. Works really well. So according to Boinco AU, we are the Australian distributor for Cork Pops, but they love Jab and Jerk and maybe it's a new hashtag. See, we affect change in the world, people. That's what we do. We're worth watching on SBS On Demand, Clovis Discovery of Natural Wines, Episode 3. He climbs Etna with Frank Canellison and Jean-Pierre Robinot.
Wow.
That's dope. Seriously, the fact that they even got Frank Canellison on camera is dope because like he doesn't like that sort of shit. Would it be offensive land on Etna is getting up there with Barolo?
Well,
it is.
Yeah,
it's man.
It is, but it's like, well, and it's a lot of there's a lot of Tuscan influence on Sicily. Maybe not so much Etna, but certainly Victoria.
Or,
I don't know. I got the feeling when I was there in Barolo that Barolo is, and it's the whole appellation argument, isn't it? Like they're very true to what they do, and they're very respectful of what they do, but extremely protective as well. Like even just to compare Barolo to anything else would be
folly.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere in the world like Barolo, as there is nowhere in the world like Etna. But in Etna, they actually have, luckily enough, in Barolo they have the crew. You know, they have different crew, single vineyards. But, and that was established though as like almost like a thing to compete with the French when they established the DOCG of Barolo. But on Etna, they've had this concept called Contrada since the dawn of time, since human beings have even been there. And so they have different names for the different Contrada, which come from different family names. It's very mafia-esque, very, very cool. And so they already have the established system to be able to denote different geographical areas, which is actually really fun. So you can taste through the different Contrada of Etna already. So they have the basic building blocks of something that could be, you know, truly great. Someone's actually noted about the value of Etna. I'm pretty confident this is like $50 or less. Yeah. Seriously, so you're right, and that is remarkable.
There's some awesome Etna wines, Etna Reds especially coming in to Australia, that are very good value.
Basic question: what's biltong?
Biltong. It's a South African jerky is the easiest way to explain it. But biltong is so different because it's it can often be made from game meat and it's dehydrated, and it also has quite the proportion of fat to protein is really important. And it's so flavorful, and there's different types of biltong as well, like different ways of
doing it.
There's nothing. Australia doesn't do anything like it that I could even compare it to. But we used to go to our deli in Pretoria, and you can buy biltong just behind, the deli. Same way you buy Fritz in South Australia.
Yeah, but Fritz and biltong are on completely different spectrums. Kerry Carter, is it high tannin because of high elevation of volcanic soil?
That is, that's my guess, is that the high elevation gives you the acidity and freshness, and same with the volcanic soil is what's giving you the tannin structure. I don't see a lot of winemaking process here giving that attribute to those wines. Like this wine, it's not particularly oaky, and normally that would lead me to think that it's the tannin is coming from oak. I actually think this is all region and soil derived.
Well, look, I think that the jury's out largely based on the science of whether soil contributes to tannin. The volcanic soil elevation certainly is going to change the acidity, and this is a very high acid, very delicate, very lean style of wine. It's very insipid, actually. It's almost anorexic, right? But it has this ballsy tannin that's insane, and that's really varietal dependent. Now, depending on the variety, where it gets planted, obviously the soil is going to change, but typically the elevation changes. Then we see this in Syrah as well, where we see different tannin profiles based on what happens in France, based on what happens in Australia. But so many different variables are being changed that we don't actually know conclusively where the tannin expression is coming from. What we do know is that anthocyanin, which is tannin, increases in respect to UV index and sunlight exposure, because essentially it's sort of a grapevine's or berry's sunscreen. Okay. So elevation brings you essentially closer to the sun, and you're going to have a higher UV index. And dependent on where you are in the world, of course. There are plenty of places that are high elevation that don't experience a lot of sun. There tends to be a loose correlation with elevation and tannin exposure. But then there's viticultural aspects. Are these bush vines? Are these not? What was the growing season like? There's just so many variables. I think tannin's very much independent, but Laura is dead right that there is no winemaking artifice that has been put into this particular wine that has made it feel like it's got more tannin. Like there is not added tannin to this. There's not added a lot of oak thrown in to be able to increase the tannin in that sort of lactone perspective. This had it as grapes. This had some damn ripe grapes. Yeah. And it's really impressive.
Which is probably why I like it as a learning opportunity too, because when we went to Barolo, and even when I was learning about Barolo, it was really hard because a lot of the individual vineyard sites are masked by what Brennan called winemaking artifice. So the use of oak or the use of additional tannin or the winemaker's input onto the variety. And so it's so hard to decipher, Kanubi versus Serralunga versus, whichever other crew of Barolo. But when you can taste wine from a vineyard that doesn't have additional oak or additives, you can actually start learning a lot more effectively.
All right, we're going to jump straight into, we've got only 5 minutes left. And I would like to know your answers to these particular questions, because this is the vinification thing. This is the winemaking thing. What opportunities exist as part of the winemaking process for a winemaker to bring complexity to his or her wine?
How many words is this? Like,
I don't know how many words, but you know.
There are so many. I just feel like that's a very vague question.
It's pretty vague, isn't it?
It's very vague. Like, I could write 2 pages on this.
Yeah. All right, start.
Okay, so the grapes arrive. So assuming that you haven't had any input in the vineyard, the grapes get processed. Even before fermentation, there's so many things you could do. You could cold soak, you could skin contact, and then I guess in terms of the yeast that you use, whether it's wild ferment or it's inoculated yeast, you've got a multitude of opportunities there. Have you added sulfur? Have you not added sulfur? What kind of expression are you going to get? Temperature? Are you doing a cool ferment, which is going to create really more like floral and citrus aromatics, or a warmer ferment, which is going to be a little bit more, I guess, savory and robust and textural? After fermentation, are you going to put it in oak? Are you going to leave it in stainless steel? Are you going to lees stir it? Are you going to let it go through Malo?
There's a lot.
There's so many. I feel like that's just a very... maybe that's the point. Look, this quiz sounds easy.
I know, right? So Subonda said, Cornelison says Nerello is Burgundy meets Barolo. I say Pinot is for Nebbiolo fans that can't hack tannin.
No, but this is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? It's Pinot with tannin.
It's Pinot with tannin.
And that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, basically. It is essentially Pinot with tannin. I wouldn't say Nebbiolo or Barolo is Pinot with tannin. Barolo is its own thing.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say that, I believe that everyone's a tannin fan. It's just that they get absorbed in the brand that is Burgundy. Now, Burgundy is fantastic, but it is quite, quite distinct, in and of itself. Thanks, Brandon Laura, for the inspiration to pull out the latest friend to open up a bottle of Jungle. Hell yeah, man. Thank you so much. Cheers, Karen. All right, we've got time for a couple more questions. What are the pros and cons of skin contact during the winemaking process?
Well, we both know what they are. Isn't there a more interesting question?
I know, but for people playing at home.
No, but I think you should talk about that one, because you're the one that actually started us doing skin contact pre-fermentation.
Well, hey, we've been making, as a human race, we've been making skin contact wines for over 1,000 years called red wines. So I think this question should also equally apply to red wine as much as it applies to white wine. Yeah. So this is talking about skin contact during the winemaking process. And the first one that in sort of our methodology of making wine is the ability to have inoculum. The ability to be able to have something actually like existing on the skins of the grapes that would allow you to conduct a safe fermentation. Secondly, depending on the style of wine that you're making, obviously as CO2 is going to be generated pushing those skins out of the fermentation, you need to try to like get it back in, depending on the style, I said. So the skin contact, the amount of time is going to determine your amount of extraction, and also the timing of your extraction. Of course, let's just say you're making Shiraz up in the Barossa and it's coming at like 16% alcohol. That's, a fair degree more than say Shiraz in Adelaide Hills is going to come in at like 12% alcohol, maybe 13. And that 3% difference is a big difference. That in the microbial world, that is a big difference. Yeah. And what happens is, obviously with the generation of ethanol, a couple of things happen at the same time. Firstly, it's a solvent. It extracts things. So a higher amount of ethanol is going to extract a little bit more. Secondly, ethanol is literally poison to yeast. So you're going to have fermentation issues. So the extraction in the terms of this particular question is probably the one that's, you can have higher levels of extraction depending on the ripeness of the grapes and depending on the alcohol content. You do, of course, in recent times have exposure to risks like things like smoke taint, higher levels of skin contact.
Yeah, where you were pressed earlier.
where you would probably desire to press earlier, or in the case of things like rosé, where you're going to be able to put it on skins for a short amount of time, maybe 3 to 6 hours, and then press prior to fermentation from there on. And that's going to determine the amount of extraction that you're going to get at very low levels of alcohol, which is going to give you that nice little pink tinge to the wine itself. So there is cons of skin contact. Well, it's a double handling. It freaking sucks. It is like you have to not just press it, you need to transfer it to a vessel, then to transfer it out of the vessel sometimes within a matter of hours, sometimes a matter of days. But it is a consideration for things like, workloads of cellar staff and stuff like that. Takes up more physical space. There can be things like botrytis on the grapes, grey rots and mold, which are extracting, smoke taint, which is extracting, which is tough. You may want to inoculate the wine. Therefore, you don't want any extra load of microbial space to be able to take up in that wine. So, there are a myriad of different issues when it comes to skin contact with wine. But we managed to get through 2 questions. Guys, thank you so much for being such an awesome audience. Of course, giving up your Sunday to chime in. I hope that we've managed to answer some of your questions amply well. Until tomorrow, we do actually have a very exciting winemaker on tomorrow that I'm sort of fanboying out. I think we've met once, and it was a fleeting meeting. But we have Alex Shirar coming on from Shirar Wines, but he was also the head winemaker for quite a number of years at Coriol. And of course, the guy's an absolute Fiano nut. Yeah. So we're definitely going to be geeking out about Fiano tomorrow. So definitely chime in, same time as we always do. But we have to say this is the last Sunday, unless we feel like doing it every Sunday. But we are going to be moving to Monday and Wednesday as of tomorrow. So for those that chime in trying to be the first commenters, please don't on a Tuesday. You're going to be disappointed. So we're going to be moving from now to a Monday and a Wednesday, and we're just going to see how that goes. We'll change it up if we have to. But of course, as things are starting to open up, we feel you guys should be going out and supporting your local pub, your local wine bar, your local restaurant. They need it right now, and we want you to. That's exactly what we have wanted, and we hope that over the last 79 to 80 episodes of this, we've offered some semblance of value to you during a really, really tough time, really sort of unprecedented time that we've all gone through. I know it's a terrible word. Unprecedented pivot. We're avoiding those. That and COVID. Drink! So it's the PTSD again. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for chiming in. We will be back tomorrow, and we can take it from there. Have a great night and enjoy the long weekend if you've got one. Has everyone got a long weekend?
Adelaide does.
Adelaide does. We're going to enjoy the long weekend. If you have one, enjoy it, please. Yeah. Anyway, cheers, guys.